I think they're the best questions. This was probably the most helpful thing I'll say on this podcast is whatever you're thinking about doing, whatever that may be, who could sue you for it? Number one question, who? Right? Like if it's your cousin or a former collaborator or some artist you've never heard of that lives on the other side of the world, who could sue you? Number two is, would they do that? Or what would they gain from doing that?
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Art Department podcast. It's Emmanuel Shiu again in San Francisco, myself, Jan Urschel in Singapore, and today we have special guest Jacob Martin out of LA. And Emmanuel, why don't you go ahead and introduce him to us?
Yeah, so as probably everybody knows, I've been doing a lot of clubhousing and NFTs and things like that. And, I've been doing a lot of research myself, and through those rooms, I've listened to Jacob speak many times, to the point where I actually felt like I knew him, but had a lot of really good information, and I got a really good vibe from him. And I thought it would be really interesting to have him on the show to explain a little bit more of the legalities of what's happening around us now in this art world, this digital art world. And I think it would be super informative. So here's Jacob. Welcome. And please start us off with a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So my name's Jacob Martin. I did the corny social media thing. So on Twitter and Clubhouse and Instagram, it's at the NFT attorney. But that is more or less what I've been doing every day for probably 4 or 5 months now. But going back a few years, 2016, 2017, I was around a bunch of the ICOs as they were forming and doing paperwork on that as a legal intern. And I loved it. I loved the chaos and the gray space, and it's always a good reminder that there are black and white rules that are undergirding everything that happens next, right? So it was ICOs, then it was Canada, where there's some black and white and also some gray. So for me, I did the ICO thing, and then I built a blockchain company myself, tried to take wills and trusts into smart contracts so that we could have like automatic testamentary distribution, right? Because probate court is the worst. Lawyers are the worst, generally. I can say that I am one. But a lot of times lawyers get in the way, and blockchain is to be frictionless, right? Hopefully no lawyers, no contracts. So there's some pros and cons there. But yeah, for me, for the last probably almost going on 5 months or so, I saw NFTs emerge. At first, it was just NBA Top Shots. I thought that sounded fun, but as a hobby. And then when I realized artists, creators, corporations, and everyone was about to get involved in cryptocurrency for the first time and IP issues for the first time, it just seemed like the SEC, the IRS, and a bunch of other people were ready to get in here and cause problems. So I started doing a lot of Clubhouse myself, staying up at all hours, researching, writing. And now I've found myself doing a ton of interesting projects. So I'm sure we'll get into some of that as we go. But it's kind of been my path.
Yeah, wow, awesome. So I mean, what is what are some of the biggest things that you found out about, the NFT world? I mean, obviously it's going to be revolving around some sort of IP. I mean, that I would assume that that's one of the big things that you just mentioned. So what have you found out about this whole IP issue?
Yeah, I think the best place for people to like start with understanding like a revolutionary use case of NFTs is Beeple, right?
Hmm.
So Beeple is a graphic designer, created a piece a day for 14 years now. Um, and if you listen to the Winklevoss twins talk about it, or Griffin and Duncan at Nifty Gateway, they'll say Beeple didn't know how to monetize his stuff. There really wasn't a way to monetize his stuff, and they showed him, hey, we can make it a unique, provenance identifier. Like we can help you certify this as
Hmm.
real. and monetize it. And his first drop at Nifty Gateway did like $4 million. And so instantly there's IP validation, right? And so I know a bunch of people who do Magic the Gathering art or comic book illustration, and they do it digitally at this point. They've never been able to sell a digital one of one on eBay. But now, if they could certify their digitally created one of one as an NFT, that's a new interesting IP issue, because previously no one was concerned about your digital one of one because you couldn't sell it. So that's not in your contract. But what if you can show provenance on a digital one of one? Why couldn't you sell it the same way as you could a physical one of one oil painting that you did for X company? So yeah, I think, again, this is where some things are black and white. You signed a work for hire, or you didn't. You created something on your own, or you didn't, right? And so there's a little bit of black and white, but then there's, well, I've always done X at Comic Con, or I've always done this on eBay, or I've always done this on Etsy. So why can't I just do that as an NFT now? I think that's a pretty good question.
And are there any sort of, if you do sign a work for hire, obviously you're saying, hey, whatever I create is yours. Is there anything being written now with NFTs in mind that you know of? Or?
Yeah. So I've been doing some. I've seen some interesting things. I helped an individual who's an actor working on a future video game. He was like, "How do I sneak NFTs into my contract with like a major AAA publishing company?" And I was like, "Just sneak in there that you have the rights to your own likeness for NFTs. So let's see what happens." And it worked. And I can tell you what game that is someday later on, but you'll know it. And it was interesting because that company wasn't paying attention. But from everything I've heard, DC and Marvel have already added to all of their new contracts for new pages for comics. We own everything, and we own the rights to NFTs. And as I've heard it said by some comic book illustrators, you don't really want to push back too hard because there's a 19-year-old somewhere who's desperate to draw Batman. Right? So I think that's an interesting concept. But yeah, I'm also, I can't really get into the details on here, but I'm presently working on what I think is the first copyright dispute in NFT land that's of note. There's a project that did X million dollars worth of revenue over a very short period of time. Allegedly, they stole artwork from another creative. Kind of went viral on Twitter, Discord, whatever. I'm working with the creator whose stuff was allegedly taken. And I'll say some of it seems pretty clear cut to me. So we'll see what the arguments look like. And they're trying to settle that privately because if it goes to court, nobody typically likes that. But I can comfortably say if that one does go to court, then I will help you get firm answers to this question because I'll be in court helping the judge write out what the firm answers should be. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
we haven't had that litigation happen yet, so it's not codified, right? Like we don't know exactly how the court feels about the word NFT. We will in the next 12 months, but that's only because somebody messed up.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had an episode covering sort of fan art before and what we thought and also sort of the general minutia, the wording
Right.
of copyright. But this takes it to a new level because you're actually like back then fan art, maybe it's you make a couple bucks on a t-shirt run, or a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. The companies probably wouldn't care, even if it was infringing on their IP. But nowadays, I mean, if you're making millions off of, say, something Disney owns, I mean, it's just a very, I mean, I don't, that's why I want to get your take on, well, I mean,
Yeah.
if I was to do an NFT of my own and it involves some kind of IP, like say, like you said, Batman, and I make 10 million, I mean, what can happen to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so there's two considerations. If a non-US person violates a US copyright holder's copyright, then right, like if someone in the US or someone outside the US, if it's one in one, one in the other, the most that can happen in court is how much money was made, right? Like that's if it was a $10 million thing, it's a $10 million lawsuit. That's it. But if a US resident violates another US resident's copyrights, then there's room for like extra damages for doing it on purpose, right? Like penalties can be assessed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a totally different conversation, depending, geographically. Um, I will say that this we won't get anywhere near an answer on this podcast because I still don't have an answer, but I think jurisdiction is one of the most fascinating parts of a decentralized network. How do you know where it was created, where the person was when they posted it on the internet? Sometimes, how do you even know who the person was? It's not like
True,
it
true.
happened in California, right? So jurisdiction, who would you sue and where would you sue them? It's like a deeply interesting question. I mean, Jan's he's in Asia right now.
Mm-mm.
Like, where would I sue Jan? Like for a thing that occurred maybe in Southern California, right? Like I'm in Southern California, but did it occur here or did it occur
Yeah,
on the
where you
decentralized
minted it could
web,
be.
right? Like it's exactly, it's a little different than the internet, which has like clear, access points. If it's a truly decentralized network with nodes in various locations, then there's no substantial ties to anywhere specific. That one's a rabbit trail. I'm sure you'll get comments on your video being like, "This guy's an idiot," but it's interesting. Jurisdiction is interesting. Um, but yeah, the Batman thing, obviously there's a whole sector of people who have made their living off of someone else's IP, right? Like helping Lucasfilm or helping Disney or helping whatever. Um, I think there's a lot of beautiful opportunity for people who create their own IP, right? So Micah Johnson with Aku, that's going to be made into a feature film, right? Um, uh, the Ugly Dolls creator, I think it's Hobarth, Mike Hobarth, something like that. I saw him talking yesterday about the success of some of his NFTs after the flop of his movie, right? So it's like it's interesting to see, uh, render universe he's creating is fascinating. Baka Arts is creating a really universe that's going to become a graphic novel. Like this is interesting creation of IP and then monetizing it piece by piece through the NFT process. It's new, right? It's new and there's provenance. This is like somewhere between Kickstarter, Indiegogo, right? It's this pre-funding of new IP, right? Like payment for what you've just created, and this opportunity to create more. I think that's awesome, and um, I hope people don't screw each other, right? Like
No, I
that's
mean, I think making sort of your own life. We've always been a big proponent of people um, doing original content and making your own IP because it's got heart, it's got soul, and you can never be sued for your own IP because it's your own
right.
IP. But the problem is, um, there's a lot of people that I have heard of, in these rooms and also have seen who are actually making a lot of money doing like a Batman.
Right.
And I mean
Right.
that, in No Saul's case, even people asked him, well, you use Disney characters. And he's like, well, come after me, because
Yep.
that's, people, right? And there's no precedent is the thing. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing has been done. Nobody's been really sued, at least not that I know of.
Right.
And so it's this sort of Wild West mentality. But you know, it's good to have some of the facts. I think too,
Yeah.
which is like you said, it's just this kind of there's some facts and there's question marks.
Yeah.
And decentralized is a good example of who do like, because some of these people aren't, you don't even know who they are.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the whole point of it. Would you have any advice on people who are saying, hey, I have this, I want to do Batman.
Right.
Is it like not advisable? Like, hey, if you're in
Well,
doubt, don't do it, or
yeah. So if you look at I think really it depends on the creator's relationship with the publishing house, right? Like, do you want them to give you more contracts? Have they already publicly said don't post NFTs, right? So if we're talking DC and you want to do more work for DC in the future, and DC said don't post any NFTs, right? Like, I don't know what else to say other than they might sue you, but they might also just blacklist you, to be fair, right? Like, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means they might sue you and they might blacklist you. And even if you win the lawsuit, they still might blacklist you, right? Like it's a personal. Some of that's going to be a personal choice at some
Right,
point.
right.
That's a good point. That's a
Obviously,
good point.
obviously, a couple of comic book illustrators specifically, right? The Wonder Woman piece that sold for over $1 million, right? There's a couple of really awesome pieces. I think a Spider-Man piece sold. I'm not naming artists, right? You guys can obviously look that up, but those are personal decisions for them to do. And I think Portion.io has a bunch of comic book art on it, or comic book tangential art. And, I was told that I think the Boss Logic Snyder cut drop that was supposed to happen on Maker's Place or Nifty Gateway or whatever it was. I guess it was probably Maker's Place. I think from what I heard, they pulled it at the last second because DC found out there was a bunch of Batman stuff already floating around on the platform. And they're like, what the heck? You're not keeping people off. Like, you're not stopping people from using our IP. Obviously, that's kind of hearsay as well, but that's what I heard through the grapevine, was that that's why it got pulled, which makes sense to me. So I don't know. I think they'll probably pull a bit of a Disney Plus where they're not going to really sue anybody. They're going to kind of let it happen. And then boom, we're going to have DC Universe NFT, right? Like Disney Plus NFT, DC Plus NFT. Like that's what it seems like they'll probably do, but we don't know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because
the advice would be, if it's your own IP, great. If you want to list in your description who you are and that you did a bunch of dope IP that was someone else's, right? I did this for Batman, I did this for whatever. You could use that. But if it's not your own and you've ever signed any kind of work for hire and you realize they've already asked you not to, that doesn't mean you can't. It just means you probably shouldn't.
There's a
yeah,
lot
no,
of
I mean,
people.
and I
Oh,
get it.
sorry. Go
It's,
ahead. Yeah.
I mean, even non NFT, right? I mean, even if you're just
Right.
talking about purely, I'm gonna sell a bunch of T-shirts, or I'm gonna do posters because of Batman, and it's because I want to. I mean, you could still get sued. Of course, I don't think anybody really wants to sue you over a couple
Right.
$100
Right.
worth of T-shirts, but legally, I mean, we, at least what we know, unless it's satire, you're not really allowed to use it. I mean, if it's on a purely legal sense, I mean, at least that's what I understood. And I'm not a lawyer, so is that
Yeah,
sort of correct?
I mean, yeah, that's so there's satire, there's kind of fair use, and then some people would maybe go as far as to argue like transformative, like you do something that's Batman, but it's not really Batman. But if someone really wants to make money off of a Batman comic they drew, then none of that comes into play, right? It's not satire and it's not
Right.
fair use. It's not transformative. It's just something they drew already. So that's tough. I think, when it comes to uh, licensing specifically, actually, sorry, I almost lost it for a second. When Crypto Kitties came out, Dapper Labs released the first ever like description of licensing around an NFT. So it's called nftlicense.org. And it's literally their definition of what you were receiving by purchasing a CryptoKitty. And in their rules, I don't remember or believe that it was like a statutory thing. I think they just came up with a number. And their number was, if you commercially use this CryptoKitty, you just can't make more than $100,000 off of it. Right. So like if you built a multi-billion-dollar brand off of one CryptoKitty or something, they weren't going to let you do that. But it was like $100,000 was that limit, which is interesting, right? So this isn't even what you can make into an NFT. That's once you have the NFT, what can you do with it? This commercial use issue. CryptoPunks is about to be a really interesting space where they're all worth hundreds of thousands of dollars now, and they want to start
Well,
monetizing their
millions
punk.
now.
Yeah, some of them, right?
Yeah.
What if they want to put it on hoodies or put it on all kinds of things? Larva Labs hasn't sued anybody yet. It's kind of the same with DC or Marvel or any of them. We don't see the lawsuits yet. So I know there's not enough clarity here, but those
Have
are
you
some
seen
thoughts.
any cease and desist or any that has happened?
Yeah. So I mean, I will say with Marvel and DC specifically, their cease and desist letter was just public. Like it was just boom, cease and desist, right? But I've seen from one brand that I can't name cease and desists to several of their artists. And then I've seen 3 cease and desist letters now from like A-list celebrities to one artist and 2 photographers that utilize their image in NFTs of some sort. And not to say that I'm like an expert or over the moon or anything. I I don't even do that much dispute, right? Like I do planning and transaction stuff. I don't typically do litigation. But all 3 of those cease and desist letters I wrote responses to, and the response was basically like, you just issued a standard cease and desist. You have no idea what an NFT is. Your arguments are terrible, right? Like you're just annoyed that somebody else is making money off of your thing, right? Off of your image or whatever. Um, what do you want us to, right? Like, do you really want my artist to take their thing down? I don't know what your hope is. And obviously, that's very casual based on what I said. I actually wrote something professional, but all 3 of those cease and desist letters that came in, I sent 3 responses, different directions, obviously. None of them ever said anything again or filed lawsuits. So cease and desist letters aren't actually like that's not as formal as what we're starting to see a little more of now, which is like DMCA copyright takedowns. So digital millennium copy that they proposed to sell all IP rights to
Actually,
and the
sorry. Could
ability to
you
burn it.
just
Go ahead.
repeat that DMCA? You kind of cut out there for a second, but I
Oh,
think that's
okay. Yeah.
important to make sure they hear that.
Yeah. So cease and desist letters aren't that scary necessarily. You just kind of have to know what your rights are, what their rights are. Typically, someone's just hoping that you'll stop whatever you're doing. But what we're seeing more of issued to platforms specifically is a DMCA copyright takedown request. And so that's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Basically, if you're going to post something on OpenSea, let's just go OpenSea, and someone else believes that you're violating their copyright, all they have to do is reach out to OpenSea and say, hey, that piece violates our copyright. OpenSea, within their terms and conditions, and based on the way the DMCA works, they have to take the piece down. If it's mentioned to the blockchain, you can't just burn it, but they can make it to where you can't go to the website and actually see that piece. Like it'll just be removed from visibility. I've seen, I know of at least 5 things that have been pulled from OpenSea and Maker's Place.
Yep.
I'm seeing more copyright takedowns coming out. And all that requires is a good faith effort. So a perfect story is there was an article that came out on ArtNet or Art Forum last week about a Basquiat piece that was listed on OpenSea. And I think they were expecting to make like 100 grand off of it, maybe 150. But what they wrote in their description was the purchaser of this NFT will have all IP rights associated with the piece conveyed to them and the ability to burn the original, which even this effort was a knockoff of what Burnt Banksy did months ago. And his was actually pretty well thought through, and his was an interesting art like choice on his own. But this was just like a grotesque effort to make a splash. And I would probably venture to say whoever did this knew that Basquiat's estate would get involved, because obviously that's so stupid of them to do. Also, I hope they're not any of your friends, but that was stupid of them to do. And I talked to an attorney in New York, and I was like, hey, this Basquiat thing's up on the table. And she works in the art law department at a big firm. So she called the Basquiat licensing agent, like the guy who runs the estate's opportunities and licensing. And they freaked out, obviously, and reached out to the necessary parties, and boom, it got taken down. Turns out that wasn't the only Basquiat piece on OpenSea. And so all the other ones got taken down as well. Because the Basquiat estate said, look, we've given no one rights to any of our stuff, and we own all of the copyrights to his works, period. And so if someone actually does own the copyright to a piece somehow, right? I don't know what that would even be, but maybe Basquiat did a work for hire for a t-shirt, right? Or a poster or something. And maybe he gave away copyrights at some point. Assuming he did, if the licensing agent asked to pull everything and OpenSea in good faith believed, well, that's Basquiat's family, we'll just pull everything, and one or two people actually still had the rights to have it up, then in good faith, they would go back and be like, hey, whoa, right? Here's, and so it's okay, that, and that'll have to get figured unknown territory. But if someone has the copyright, like if you created something yourself and you saw somebody else misappropriating it or using it, artists should actually feel pretty comfortable knowing that you should be able to request a takedown, and they should take it down. That doesn't mean that that'll be the final answer. Go ahead.
Is that only on OpenSea, or is it on like all the platforms?
So it's on all the platforms for the most part, to my understanding. And it's interesting, like if you look at Maker's Place is one of the few platforms where if you post something, it has this little, it's like a certification. It's kind of basically Maker's Place version of a PSA authentication, right? And they're just like, Maker's Place certified original work created by so-and-so. So when you're minting to Maker's Place, you are guaranteeing to Maker's Place that this is your IP. You have the rights to this IP. This is your original, right? And if it turns out that you lied or you didn't, then Maker's Place is happy to pull it down because it messes with their authenticity approach.
But here's the interesting part, which is when you've already minted something, it's already on the blockchain, so there's nothing you can do, right? I mean, how do you actually take that down if it's already sold?
Right. So that's gonna be this really tough spot. So I mentioned earlier briefly that if a takedown request happens and a piece of art is pulled from the website, right? It's not pulled off of the blockchain. So if I sold you a piece and then my work got pulled off of the purchasing side of the website, you're just holding the bag, right? You have a piece that you can't even see on the website anymore, but you paid for it and you can't sell it. You basically bought stolen work and didn't know it. So probably just like in the real world when you buy stolen art that you didn't realize.
So basically, you what you're saying is you own the token that's on the blockchain, basically the information, but when it points to an image, that image is already taken down, so you actually basically don't own anything except for that information on the blockchain.
Yeah, so that's where you would like end up in like a metadata conversation potentially, right? So if Maker's Place said we're not showing this on our Maker's Place URL anymore, but the data actually existed on IPFS and you could just view it from any platform, then maybe even if it got pulled from Maker's Place website, you could find a way to sell it via IPFS. But like Maker's Place specifically and Nifty Gateway specifically, like a lot of the argument is like, Are you purchasing metadata? Like, are you even purchasing an NFT? Or are you basically purchasing a pointer that points to an image, that points to a URL that hosts the image, right? And so if Maker's Place just makes the URL unavailable, or Maker's Place fails as a platform, do you lose everything?
Yeah, that's definitely a bigger conversation.
You know
Jan,
what I
I
mean?
saw you had a
I
question.
have tons of questions.
Yeah.
I have tons of questions.
Go,
I mean,
Jan. I mean, I don't want to take over
no,
the
no worries,
question.
no worries. We're getting to all of them, I think. One thing I've seen pop up a lot, and I'm just wondering what the legality of that is ignorance. So a couple of people that have put up images that is obviously fan art that they then minted and sold on whatever platform. I forgot what it was. I don't remember the specific thing, but so I was somebody was asking them like, hey, are you not concerned about the copyright? This is obviously like even the title of it is like let's say for example's sake, it's Mickey Mouse. Somebody draws Mickey Mouse just exactly like Disney would do it. He mints it and sells it, and it's sold and it's done. And somebody asked him like, hey, are you not concerned that Disney is going to come after you? And he's like, oh, I didn't really think about that. Like, oh, I just wanted to experiment and see if people like Mickey Mouse on NFTs. In another example, I talked to somebody and who was responding to our fan art episode and was like, hey, so I was doing some Star Wars fan art or like I was doing some Star Wars art that is inspired by the movies, kind of like, let's call it keyframes that are not in the movies. Just kind of like expanding the universe or whatever. Then he's like, oh, I didn't even realize this is fan art. Does something like that hold up anywhere? Can you feign that ignorance to say like, oh, like I didn't know, if it's fake or not?
Yeah,
Like,
it's a good. I mean, it's a good
yeah.
question. It's ignorance. I'm not going to use lawyer
Sorry.
words. There's a bunch of different ways to describe the fact that ignorance is not good enough, right? Like, pretty much ever, ignorance is typically just not good enough. If it's like a statutory issue that didn't require intent, right? So like murder requires, like, there's different types of murder, right? But cold-blooded first-degree murder is you had to intend to do it. Like, you thought about it, you knew what you were doing, and you did it. But that's why there's like murder 1, murder 2, murder 3, right? Manslaughter, right? So it's like you still killed somebody, but maybe you didn't mean to, or you didn't try. But like they're still gonna punish you for it, you know. So I use that as in, let's jump to this issue where it's like you premeditatedly drew Mickey Mouse, you knew you were violating a copyright, you really wanted to. There's actually a piece on Zora, the website Zora, that was, I believe it was Mickey Mouse's head or Mickey himself, and it said like it said on the piece, this is in violation of Disney's copyrights. We will happily pay our own court and tribunal fees. That was the piece. And instead of Zora allowing it to sell, one of the co-founders of Zora, another Jacob, they transferred it into Jacob's wallet because they couldn't force this person to burn it. They couldn't force burn it, but they also didn't want it to exchange hands for money. So they did a free transfer, like they force transferred it to the co-founder's wallet. So that was obviously, that's murder 1, right? That's deeply intentional. They tried. You could come all the way down to someone who just doesn't know much about NFTs or IP, or just really genuinely didn't think about it, and they doodled a Star Wars thing or Mickey and they posted it. Technically violating a copyright, on purpose or not on purpose, is still violating a copyright. So the two questions I always ask people, I think they're the best questions. This was probably the most helpful thing I'll say on this podcast, is whatever you're thinking about doing, whatever that may be, who could sue you for it? The number one question, who? Right? Like if it's your cousin or a former collaborator or some artist you've never heard of that lives on the other side of the world. Who could sue you? Number two is, would they do that? Or what would they gain from doing that? Right? So if the answer is Disney, okay, they're scarier than the average bear, right? And what would they gain from that? Well, they would probably like to bash every one of your skulls so that they can go ahead and continue to retain their IP. But if we look at Etsy, there's Disney and Disney derivative stuff everywhere, right? So they literally can't bash every skull. So if somebody's making a few $1,000 in the corner selling Mickey Mouse doodles, decent chance they just never even get on Disney's radar, right? Like, but if you go on OpenSea and there's only 4 people in the whole world claiming to sell a Basquiat, and Basquiat's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and their estate is known to be litigious and known to sue people, they're gonna sue you if you use Basquiat in the title and it's on OpenSea, right? Like, so it's Disney's interesting because they're super scary, but also, do they have time to sue everybody? No, right?
Yeah, I
But
mean,
you take Basquiat or Warhol, who's also really scary, and they will take the time to sue you. So it's like everything you do is kind of like, who could sue you? How much would they sue you for? Would they sue you? I'm not recommending anyone break laws based on those codes, but it is helpful to think through. Like, if you're scared of boogeyman, it's like, okay, well, how big is the boogeyman? Do they like to sue people? What would they gain from doing that? That's actually a really helpful framework for like making certain decisions.
Okay, so I mean, another question I had, and I mean, again, it's probably difficult to answer, but if we go to the like imaginary state, okay, I'm like that has to do with international law, I guess. But let's say I have created this IP, I have registered a trademark for my own IP, and I see somebody else doing something with it, right? Like, I don't know, selling T-shirts, minting NFTs with what is obviously my work. Like, and let's say it's even in different countries. Let's say I've applied for a trademark, I'm a US citizen, but I see some company in, I don't know, Germany, China, Australia, I don't know, wherever, right? Use that. What can I realistically do? Do I have to kind of say like, yeah, shit happens? Or
Yeah, so there's a couple layers here, right? Because I can't tell you how many times fake Louis Vuitton wallets and purses sell on the streets of Hong Kong,
of
Singapore,
course,
Jakarta,
everywhere.
right? Like, so they've been trying for probably 20
Yeah,
years to
yeah,
shut
yeah.
down counterfeit. So step one is always the reminder that NFTs are new, asterisk, nothing is really new, right? So like, this is just a new world with a new version of counterfeiting.
Yeah.
I think I've actually chatted with a couple of Fortune 500s, a couple of companies that have really big IP holdings. I typically work with artists and startups and stuff, but I've consulted a couple of big companies trying to feel the space out. And one of their biggest concerns was selling NFTs that included fully high resolution images, because it would make it so easy to create knockoff trading cards. I'll just say trading cards, right? If right now, if you look online at your favorite trading card game, you cannot get the purest high resolution image, right? It's a little bit off. And so a counterfeit of a Black Lotus or a first edition Charizard, like, you would know it was a counterfeit. PSA would know it's a counterfeit. But if Wizards or Pokemon were to drop perfectly high resolution images in with the sale of an NFT, which many NFTs come with unlockable content that's the full high res image or the 3D model filing, right? Like, they give you the goods on the other end of the purchase, and they hope you're not going to do anything with it. But yeah, let's take your scenario where someone does do something with it. Okay, well, we know Louis Vuitton has and Ray-Bans have dealt with knockoffs for decades. We know that wizards and Pokemon are deeply afraid of counterfeits, and thus far they believe they catch most of them, right? They're not super worried about the current counterfeits, but they're afraid of new counterfeits if they do NFTs. If an artist, if you believe your stuff is being utilized by someone else in an NFT specifically, right? I'm not talking t-shirts or hoodies, just an NFT, you can utilize the DMCA copyright takedown yourself. It's not just built for Disney, it's built for anybody. So if you can, what I would recommend is have a Word document. Each URL that you think is an individual or a piece that was yours, take all the URLs, take screenshots of each piece, put that in a Word document, send it off to OpenSea or Maker's Place or whoever and say, hi, my name is so and so. This is my work. It's being utilized by this other person. And, I, in good faith, believe that this is my work. I made this at X point in time, or whatever you feel the need to say. You don't have to show your copyright registration or anything. But so you give them that, they should take the piece down right away. Say the other side disagrees with you though, right? In the way copyright works, at least in the US, it's a little different in Canada and the UK, is my understanding. But in the US, to enforce your copyright, so like to sue someone for actually violating your copyright, you have to turn around and register your copyright. So you do have one, but you're supposed to register it to actually enforce it. Which is fine. You can always backdate your copyright. It's just you kind of want to know when you created the thing, or you have the file on your computer or something that shows like that moment of creation, if possible. A friend of mine showed me a piece that Baldessari, I think he was professor at UCLA, some like art legend that I don't know him well. But he had a conceptual piece that was like a gray canvas, and he wrote on it like concept conceived 10 a.m. Tuesday, and he wrote the date, like, and it was this conceptual art piece that was literally just when he conceived his thing, and it was a take on copyright law is what he was going for. It's like, this is when I conceived my idea, and it was just an interesting piece. But the more juice you have, or even, I mean, frankly, if you're creating new images, it doesn't, I mean, Beeple has proof, right? Every day, Beeple just posts his piece, and he's like, that's my piece. That's my proof. I'm the first person to ever show it. So Instagram might not be a bad idea either, right? Or just somewhere where it's like, this was mine first. You just got to have a little something to prove if you want to prove that it was yours.
Because I was under the impression, which is kind of what you're saying, is that just by creating it, there is already copyright in it. But you're saying in order to enforce it, then you need to bring it into actually something more official than just
So
okay.
Basically, it's called a natural copyright, right? So when a photographer takes a photo, or when you've created a thing or whatever, the copyright is yours immediately. But if you want to go to court, the court's going to go, that's cute that you say it's yours. Right? Like that's more or less the court's response. Is that's cute. Tell us, prove something.
So
so it's not that hard to register.
So let's say like in addition to that, like let's say the platform it's on is based in America. The guy who minted it is in Brazil. I'm the copyright holder. I'm sitting in the UK. Like, do I need to register the copyright in the UK, in the US? Do I need to get a US lawyer involved to write to whatever platform in the US? Do I need to get a UK lawyer involved that is in my place of residence? Like,
when we get into truly, so it's both an international IP issue and it's a decentralized network issue, and there might be an anonymity issue, right? What if the person in Brazil that's minting is anonymous? How in the world are you going to sue that person? Right? Like, I don't want to, I'm not promoting any negativity or theft or anything, but to be fair, there's no guarantee that you can stop that person. right? Like you can hope the platform shuts them down, and you should before. Well, so that's what I'm saying. So I guess the best answer I could give is if someone's in the US, stuff's being stolen by someone in Brazil, but it's on a platform in the US, you do the DMCA copyright takedown request, and they should just pull it down. Like that's step one. You go to them, and if they don't pull it down, you're in the UK, they're in the US, you just suit them for not shutting down the theft. Right? Like that would be the straight answer, I guess. I guess maybe I do know the answer to the question, which is you probably can't get to the person in Brazil because you probably don't know who they are. You don't know how to sue them, right? But you just go to the platform, and the platform has to figure it out.
Yeah, that's good.
Look at that. I figured something out on my own.
Great. Emmanuel, do you have anything else?
Well, I think for me mainly it's just it's really interesting information, and it really does sound like it's just one of those things where things are being figured out now. And I think for anybody who's doing stuff that they're actually looking at, they're questioning whether they're using something that's IP, someone else's IP. I would just say err on the side of caution. And because you don't want to be made an example of, because who knows, at some point some big company might just be pissed off and make an example out of you. You just don't know, and it's just not worth challenging that, I think. I mean, that would be my advice, but of course take of it what you will. Is there any advice, last minute things you want to say, Jacob?
Yeah, I think this whole topic of NFTs specifically, like long term, I'm bullish on smart contracts in general. Like I have been for years. Literally, I tried to build a wills and trust platform. I just believe in the automatic nature, the frictionless nature. I hope illustrators and artists can get paid off of their work forever. I think it'd be great if they could have a 2% rider associated with films they've worked on, associated with pieces they've put out there, and hoodies that went on a hoodie, but they get a 1% royalty forever, right? That's way annoying to do with current accounting systems. But if we could get smart contracts in play in general, right, whether they were NFTs or whatever the mechanism needs to be. So we probably only touched on, and we didn't touch on enough things, I'm sure, for everyone to be like, yay, I learned a ton today. But it's an expansive space, and up until 5 months ago, I probably worked mainly with, I did work mainly with startups, venture capital funded startups and corporate type stuff. And so my a few months, I've worked with traditional painters, musicians, celebrities, athletes, comic book illustrators, card game illustrators. Like everybody wants in. It's fun.
Well, I think that was really great, Jacob. I think even though you say like people won't get much out of it because we haven't discussed much, I think there's really a lot of interesting knowledge that I think you helped everybody gain here. Is there any place where people maybe can reach out to you? Maybe they can find you on Clubhouse, or I don't know where else you usually which other social networks you usually use. I don't know if people have questions, if people want to know more, if people feel like, hey, I need your legal services, like where can they find you?
Yeah, so on Clubhouse, Twitter, and Instagram, I have the handle @the NFT attorney. And then my website, people can always email me. It's www.jtmtechlaw.com. And so my email address is there. I'm open.
Yeah, we'll put the links in the description below so everybody can reach out. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. It's really late in LA already, I know. So we want to let you go. And again, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. And
yeah, guys.
To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.